Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. So, Alexei Navalny, he was an honorable journalist. Oh, he was murdered. Blah, blah, blah. Outraged by the West. And it just springs to mind, well, you say all these things, but on the other hand, you're like, oh, give us Assange, give us Assange. How dare he report our war crimes? The hypocrisy. And what about Seth Rich as well? Don't worry, NPCs, go back to sleep. What about Seth Rich? The pure and absolute hypocrisy. Oh, Israel has a right to defend itself. Blah, blah, blah. Israel this, Israel that. But then, oh, Putin's war, Putin's invasion. God said he will lift up the skirt. And all your hypocrisy is just there on show for the world to see. And everybody is watching and you can't help yourselves. Your nations are in so much trouble. Right. Chapter 21. APOLLYON. The battle between Deng Chao and the Christians was on in earnest. And it continued that way as the countdown toward the end of the 3.5 years of tribulation continued. In the 2 years from the time that Deng Chao had first caused the sacrifices to cease and had moved into the temple in Jerusalem, both sides had lost count of the millions who had chosen to reject the mark and the millions who had been executed to appease Deng Chao's rage. Although Pius was slightly more sane than the Antichrist himself, he was also becoming addicted to the sickening pleasure that came with conducting such a worldwide inquisition. It was the thrill of pure, unadulterated power that attracted them now. Except that in their case, it was very much impure and very much adulterated use of power that had made it all so evil. But although Deng Chao and Pius were killing many more people than Rayford and Chaim were converting, the Christians were clearly winning the spiritual battle. The numbers of people asking to become part of the tribulation force were growing every day in spite of killings. The asteroid and meteorite showers had left millions dead and worldwide destruction. Neither the UN nor the governments of its individual member nations seemed compatible of dealing with the problems that flowed on from the disasters. The world appeared to be heading back to the dark ages. Little joke there between us woke ones. People everywhere were disillusioned. Deng Chao was definitely slipping in the popularity stakes. But dissatisfaction with the New World Order was not the main reason why people were choosing to become followers of Jesus. People joining the tribulation force were primarily moved by the testimony of those who went before them, a testimony that shone forth even at their executions. Surely there was something beyond this life, and these followers of Jesus had found it. The two witnesses, far from being spooked by Deng Chao and Pius's show of strength and by their cruel efforts to locate them, had actually announced simultaneous press conferences, one in Sydney and one in London. The frenzied response from the media showed how little control Deng Chao had over the press as well. Troops were sent to break up the conference and to arrest or kill Rayford and Chaim. But in both cases, it was the troops who were destroyed, as the two witnesses simply spoke a word and the soldiers fell to the ground, their insides eaten out by maggots. When it came time for Chaim and Rayford to leave their respective press conferences, They spoke once more, and everyone present became temporarily blind. In the ensuing confusion, the two witnesses merely walked away unnoticed. The press conferences themselves were an overwhelming success for the Christian cause. The two witnesses exuded such an air of calm and confidence throughout their respective interviews that the whole world could not help but be impressed. What they said from opposite ends of the world was almost the same. They explained in clear, simple language that all God wanted was for his people to give him the honor that he deserved as their creator. They said that Deng Chao and Pius and others like them were only God's puppets placed on the earth to test the faith of each individual. And they finished with a heartfelt plea for the people to turn from their service to the Antichrist and his mark, and to put their faith totally in God and in his Son, Jesus, before the next curse fell on each of them personally. They did not specify what form the curse would take. You will be wishing you could die to escape it, Rayford promised. I would not want to wish it on anyone, but it is going to happen, believe me. You have very short time to repent. Please, for your own good, turn now. Even cutting your hand off would be nothing by comparison to what awaits you if you do not turn now. The press conference, which included live broadcasts all over the world, resulted in the biggest influx into the tribulation force that the Christians had so far experienced. There were too many for the 12 tribes to handle on their own, so some of the people who had already undergone amputations themselves were being called to assist with operations. It did not take long for the rest of the world to become aware of the increased support for the Christian cause. Deng Chao, who had been fuming ever since the press conference, was out of his mind. "Puppets, are we?" he shouted a few weeks after Rayford and Chaim first reported to have called him that. He threw yet another newspaper down after reading the hate word. "Puppets? How dare they?" He thrust his hands into the air and threw his head back in frustration as he shouted. The media had even taken up that one word. The media had even taken up that one word and woven it into just about every report that came out about the 12 tribes after that. So the media are now constantly puppets. Doesn't that sound familiar, how the media just insert words constantly, these key words, you know? Remember them, follow the science, stay safe, flatten the curve. And even now, Putin's war, the right to defend themselves, October 7th, and it's like nobody can express sympathy for Palestine without also including the devastating terrorist attack committed by the terrorist regime called Hamas. They always have to say it. Can you see it yet? Are you paying attention? Deng Chao went on a rampage through his palatial drawing room. Knocking furniture and knocking things over, he smashed a heavy vase into a large mirror. Pius looked on almost indifferently now. He was growing accustomed to Deng Chao's rages, and he had had a few of them himself. "I'll show them who the puppets are, and who pulls the strings. I'll show them," Deng Chao shouted. "Apollyon! Get up here! Apollyon!" "Yes, master." And suddenly at Deng Chao's right hand stood a creature that could only be a fierce and powerful demon. Its face was uglier than anything that Pius had ever seen before, apart from Deng Chao's other face. Pius shrank back into a dark corner, hoping that the creature would not take notice of him. "Apollyon, bring up your troops!" "You mean bring them up here?" Apollyon asked in disbelief. "Yes, bring them up here!" Deng Chao shouted, and his face assumed the grotesque form that Pius so feared. "I want the world to know how much power I have, and want them to taste what I can do to them. I want to teach those Christians a lesson." "But won't they hurt the people too, Master?" Apollyon said. "Do we really want that now, before time?" "I know what I'm doing," Dan Chao shouted. "If I can't send them to hell, at least I can bring hell to them." "They're taking people away from me, but I can have the satisfaction of tormenting them now before they die." Pius was not so sure about the wisdom of tormenting their own people, but if Deng Chao's plan would bring some suffering to the aliens, Pius's name for the two witnesses, he never used the term Christian when referring to the believers because it reminded him of what he had once claimed to be. If Deng Chao's plan would bring suffering to the 12 tribes, then it was worth a lot of collateral damage, as Deng Chao liked to call it. "Now, Apollyon, do it now!" Deng Chao bellowed, and his demon's face lit up as he prepared to watch what followed. The floor of the room split down the middle, tearing the carpet and splintering the floorboards. Smoke came out, dense black smoke, and it filled the room, filled the palace, poured out into the street, and eventually filled nearly all of Jerusalem. People could barely breathe. And then, out of the smoke, there came sound of troops, a kind of rhythmic beating of hooves, and the metallic bumping and scraping of armor. It sounded distant and faint at first, but then it grew intensely. People at the limits of the smoke were the first to see what the sound was, were the first to see where the sound was coming from, and they instinctively turned to run. It was a great cloud of locusts, or at least creatures that resembled locusts, but they were a strange mutation. Their armored bodies and metallic wings made them sound like knights on horsebacks when they flew in a horde, as they were at the moment. On their tails were stingers like those on a scorpion. The locusts did not attack crops or grass or trees. Instead, they attacked people. They had tiny, sharp teeth that they used to get a hold on someone before jabbing their poisonous stinger in. The pain was unbearable, worse than any pain of childbirth. The poison paralyzed their limbs as well, making it impossible for victims to do more than roll on the ground in agony for 2 or 3 hours it took for the pain to wear off. Painkillers were largely ineffectual, and there was no known antidote. Many would be stung over and over, despite every attempt to escape the horrible plague. The locusts kept coming out of the thick black cloud all that day. They left Jerusalem in separate hordes, each one going in different directions. They would each work their way around the world, all over the next 5 months, stinging all who were in their way. All, that is, except the members of the 12 tribes. Perhaps it was some residue from the tiny transporter, some residue from the mark, that these creatures were attracted to. Or perhaps it was divine protection for the 144. In either case, it did not take long for Rayford, Chaim, and the media to recognize the irony of the trap that Deng Chao had fallen into. Rayford and Chaim had predicted great suffering all over the earth, suffering that could be so painful that people would wish they could die. They had pronounced the curse, but Dang Chao himself had been the puppet through which it had become reality. His own tiny alien creatures, with their metal wings, sharp teeth, and scorpion tails, were the instrument through which God gave the world a taste of what hell would be like. At the same time, God had protected the people who were the target of Dang Chao's hate. The tribulation force were not, as were the 12 tribes, totally immune to the locust, but the pain for them seemed to be little more than a bee sting by comparison to what others felt. When Christians, whether from the 12 tribes or from the tribulation force, came upon others who had been stung, they offered comfort, prayer, and whatever practical assistance they could give. It did not take away the pain, but it became a powerful testimony, not only of God's power to protect his own, but also the love that Christians had even for their enemies. The rest of the world, those who had not converted to faith in Jesus by this time, were indeed becoming more and more evil, more and more enemies of God, and of all who would follow him. Every kindness from the Christians only increased their hatred. Although countless millions had converted to faith in Jesus by this time, the majority of the Earth's population continued to support Dang Chao and his policies. They believed his lies about the two witnesses. They believed his lies about the two witnesses being the cause of all of the Earth's problems, and they felt and expressed nothing but hatred for God. The 3.5 years of the Great Tribulation were only a year away from completion. By the time the locust plague had ceased, 5 months after they had arrived, the locusts returned to Jerusalem, each having circled the globe. It was like a rewind of their arrival. Another cloud of thick black smoke covered the city. They flew into it, and then the cloud of smoke disappeared down through the hole in Dang Chao's palace, taking the fearsome creatures with it. Zion Benju writes, and this is the best one yet, the description of the locusts is quite detailed in the Revelation, chapter 9. They may be mutant insects, demons, i.e. fallen angels, or even tormented souls trapped inside tiny little machines, as a description of them each having human faces suggests. Me personally, I believe these are still the experiments of the fallen angels. Remember, in Genesis and in Enoch, how they corrupted all the things on the earth. They corrupted the creeping things. For a world that has largely assumed that hell is a fairy tale and that the devil is a joke, this chapter may be a bit hard to swallow, possibly even infuriating. But consider what it would have sounded like 200 years ago. If we had talked of cell phones, computer graphics, jets, automatic bombs, and laser images. God's technology is light years ahead of our own, and so there may yet be some big surprises for those of us living in the confines of what little 21st century science can tell us about life, the universe, and everything. We personally believe that God acts in accord with his own rules, but we also believe that only God has the complete rule book. And so there may be dimensions that we have not even begun to fathom yet. Witches, fairies, UFO sightings and other psychic phenomena are being taken quite seriously by many these days. So why rule out the possibility of angels, devils, curses, and divine protection, especially when they come from a source that is as otherwise reliable as is the Bible? There we go. So yeah, that's the truth. People more believing in witches, fairies, UFO sightings. Remember where we were this time last year with the balloons in the sky? Remember that? And they tried to hint at aliens, and then people weren't having it. People were mocking everywhere. People thought this is ridiculous, and then they quickly switched to China. Remember that? Witches. Yep, we've seen that. Taylor Swift, so on. Oh, it's a joke. The celebrities are just joking. They're just joking. Yeah, all right. Okay. Harry Potter. Stranger Things. Psychic phenomena. People are still looking at, horoscopes and tarot cards. TV shows like Haunted Houses and all them silly programs on Blaze and UFO sightings and all that kind of stuff. And people are buying into it. But as soon as you bring out the Bible, people are like, oh, people get angry. People are like, no. But consider what it would sound like if 200 years ago we talked about mobile phones, computers, jets, atomic bombs, and laser images, AI. Unfathomable 200 years ago. Totally unfathomable. But we're getting there. So far it's just all the political issues that are playing out. It's happening. You hear the one world voice going out throughout the world, concentrate on Palestine. Don't concentrate. Concentrate on Hamas, don't concentrate on Palestine. Concentrate on Putin, don't concentrate on the Azov battalion and the Nazis. Concentrate on climate change. Concentrate on vaccines. I mean, measles, they're trying to say measles is coming back now. Like the timing, it's just the timing. Yes or no? The timing is just ridiculous. When we've all been getting our measles, mumps and rubella for decades and decades and decades now. And now they're trying to say how it has some sort of return. Doesn't it? Like, it's very suspicious, very sinister. Anything to get something. They don't have money for this, they don't have money for that, but they have plenty of money for vaccines, They ask you for charity money to send to the other side of the world, to send to Africa for water wells and for this and that and blah, blah, blah. But they have millions just to give free vaccines and free immunizations, whatever they want to call them. Free this, free that. And I'm going to say it again, like, when it comes to all these water charities, oh, they don't have clean water and blah, blah, blah. Like, this is the age-old thing. Water is so important to the human body. If there was no clean water, people would just migrate to somewhere else. It's tradition for these people to walk a couple of miles to go and get water. They've done it for hundreds of years. And if the water was unclean and it was full of disease, wouldn't these people just die off? Wouldn't they just die off? They're taking your money and using it for other things. It's just ridiculous. So, rhetorical question. It's just a question. Was not Navalny a huge homophobe? And wasn't he deeply against this LGBT community? Have the media conveniently left that out? Just rewind a few years. Rewind 8 years or so. Rewind. Ask yourself that question. Do your research. And then also ask, why have the media conveniently left that bit out during his international media eulogy right now? And I'm sorry, you can't say nothing while Julian Assange still rots in a cell. Because you want to do the exact same thing to Assange. Can you see it yet? Are you awake yet? Is the truth in you? Can you believe your own eyes and ears? Because these people, they really, really, really do want to drag you to hell with them. So it's up to you. It really is up to you. Seriously, make the change now. Make the choice. Because the way I see it, just from reading scriptures, is that you come willingly. You come on your own accord. And you are welcome with open arms. You can come and work with us. That's by coming willingly. Or later on, after great tribulation, after living in desolate wastelands, you come begging. It's one or the other. But many of you won't make it at all. That's why we do it. That's why we make the change, because we want to make it. We are not saved yet, but we would like to be saved. We would really like to be saved. Because I hope not to be around for all this. I hope that we're gone. And I think it's highly likely that we will be gone. before this gets really, really, really bad. And the scriptures say if you want to soften the blow, you have to assist us. You have to assist believers, God-fearing people, followers of Christ, and the children of Israel to get the hell out of Dodge. You have to assist that. Because it's going to happen anyway. So do it of your own accord, or it's going to happen anyway, and totally destroyed. That's what the book says. The door is open. Christ said, I am the door. Walk through it. This is the way.